Hello and welcome to another broadcast of the Women's Professional Ministry Directory. I am Kristen Thomas, and we are so excited to have another interview. We had 2 interviews last night that were very special and very phenomenal. We encourage you to check those out, but we have a special interview tonight, and so we're so excited to get into that, and I'll throw it over to Angel to introduce our guest.
Again, my name is Angel Smith. I'm a second-year seminarian. I'm the treasurer for the Women's Clergy Network organization. And I'm really excited about our next guest. As you said, Kristen, this guest is special because so often when we think about women in ministry, we focus more on the pastoral role and we leave out the professor. So for this interview, we like to shine some light on the women in academia. So I would like to introduce Pastor Rahel Wells. Welcome here.
Thank you.
And she's the Associate Professor of Biblical Studies for Andrews University. She works with the undergrad students, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
So we'll just jump right into it with our first question. And our first question for you is, how did you get involved in ministry?
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting question to think about because I am not sure there's one particular point in my life. I grew up with my parents both teaching in the seminary, actually. So I grew up as a seminary kid, traveling all over with them to camp meetings and churches. And, my dad would teach classes in Israel sometimes and going there as a kid. So I felt like I was kind of a part of it all along. And I remember sitting and listening to my dad preach. My mom was not yet teaching in the seminary. And I remember thinking like weird little kid thoughts, right? But I remember thinking like, who's going to do the stuff my dad does when my dad is no longer doing it? And I just remember like having that burden on my heart because I was so blessed, even though I heard his sermons over and over and over, but I was just so blessed by them and so moved by them. And I still share a lot of the stuff that he shared with me, in my classes. And so I think that's probably what started it, but it was very long and circuitous route. I also in college got asked to teach a Sabbath school class at my church to the juniors. And I remember being terrified of that. But I've been teaching kids Sabbath schools ever since. Like, I just love it. And so it just, I think having both the family background and then having people who saw and believed and asked still a kid, right, to teach other kids. And I think that's really both my church family and then my own family were probably the impetus for me for the ministry aspect.
Wow, that's very special. I love the terminology seminary kid. We often hear pastor's kid. And so that is so cool that you were living in an institution. That was your life. That was really what you came to know so personally. So speaking of academia, can you share with us your educational journey?
Yeah, and I think that's why the ministry question is so interesting because I didn't resist it. I wasn't one of these people that resisted the call. I just didn't know what my call was. And I remember, in college wrestling with what major I should take because I was undeclared for a year and a half. And I liked so many areas. I didn't know, I took all these different classes and I was trying to decide. And I finally chose biology because it challenged me. And I think I wasn't at that point. I didn't find Bible classes challenging. I think having grown up with my parents, I'm just like, oh, this is easy. Why would I do this? I want something that really challenges me. And I saw the need for scientists who are faithful to God's word. And so I was a biology major fully in college, loved it, embraced it, but then, wanted to go on and eventually teach biology. I already knew at that point I wanted to be a teacher. I felt that call strongly, but I thought it was going to be in biology. But I remember thinking, I really want to be a biologist who's trained in theology. And there's so few of those. We need them. So I'm going to go to the seminary and get a degree and then go back to biology. So I did. I got a master's in Old Testament, and that's when I took Hebrew and really loved it. And but I still felt not very challenged in my classes. I just remember thinking, okay, I'm doing this to go back to biology. So then I started my master's in biology here at Andrews also. And so I worked on that. But after about 2 years, I was, getting close to the end. Well, it ended up taking me 6 years for a variety of other reasons. But those 2 years, I got a call right before the semester started, and it was from the seminary, the Old Testament department, and they were like, "We are desperate. One of our professors left suddenly, and so in order to figure everything out, we had to move the professor who was teaching all the Hebrew at that point to doing this other position, which was an archaeology position, and there was no one else trained to do that. So like, we are desperate for Hebrew teachers." And they called like everyone under the sun who had taken Hebrew 3, advanced Hebrew, which was like kind of beyond the intermediate Hebrew, which I had like 2 years before, and I'm like, I don't really remember my Hebrew. I'm in the middle of my biology degree, but I'm a poor student. I need money. I'm like, sure, I'll teach Hebrew, So I found myself loving Hebrew more and more. And I was just like, what do I do, Lord? What are you trying to tell me? I don't really know. I was wrestling. So I was like, okay, I'm going to apply to doctoral programs in both. So I applied to 3 biology doctoral programs and 3 Old Testament PhD programs. And I got accepted to 2 of each. And I was like, this is not, I was just like, what do I do? You're not giving me any answers, God. So I deferred for a year, prayed some more, took Greek, took some prerequisites that I would need. And it was during a class on Romans, believe it or not, even though I'm an Old Testament person. But Dr. Che at the seminary, he helped me to see that I could be challenged by theology, and that it was just as rich and deep and beautiful and challenging as was science. And so I think that was kind of the switch for me, that I was like, I want to do this. I remember we had to write anyway, that's another story, but it was so awesome for me. And so I ended up choosing to go to Wheaton College in Chicago and do a PhD in Old Testament. And part of the reason I chose that school was because they were interested in my biology background. So the fact that I had a master's in biology and I wanted to do some interdisciplinary stuff for my dissertation. And so, And then I still thought, though, at that point, entering that program, I'm like, okay, when I'm done with this, then I'll go back and do a PhD in biology. I don't think I understood how hard a PhD would be, I'm like, oh, it's not a big, anyway, that is not going to happen probably in my life unless God does anything. But I still did not think I would get a job. I remember feeling I was leaving a sure job in biology because I'd been told by multiple people in biology, like, look, you get your degree in biology, we'll hire you because we need strong, solid, conservative teachers. And I, talked with Old Testament professors, and they're like, there's no jobs. Like, you're not going to get a job. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go for it because this is where God's leading me, and trust, the future. And I have a job. So God is crazy, right? I mean, all there too, but it's been this zigzag path in my life. And yet God has used all of those things because I now am able to teach bioethics. The biology department asked me to teach that, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't have the biology background. And I'm involved in a lot of science and religion discussions, which again, I wouldn't have been able to do. So God doesn't waste things. And I remember I used to think like, I should have just gone straight, into theology. And now I'm like, no, this was exactly the path that God needed me to go on, even though it was hard to see at that point.
Yeah, it's a lovely story of kind of trying to discern God's will. I think both Kristen and I both can relate. We have a different background. I have a science background. She also has a science background, computer science. But we're both here in the seminary now. So it's really cool how God, the key thing I heard in what you said is God doesn't waste things. So it's really cool how even though we feel like our path is like this, like God is using all of that. He's growing us and teaching us in those moments. Our next question for you is, what is your ministry and leadership experience?
Yeah, this is a fun question too, because like you said there at the beginning, like I love both aspects of things. I love the academic side. I love digging deep into research and writing. So I'm involved in writing, co-authoring 2 of the new volumes for the new SDA Bible commentary on Habakkuk and Deuteronomy. And I'm the ATS president-elect, which is the Adventist Theological Society, for this year, and then I'll become the president after that. So I have a lot of like academic related leadership stuff. But I really enjoy that. But I think if I was only doing that, I wouldn't feel like my heart was where it needed to be. And so some of my favorite things that I also do are our ministry in my local church. So I'm an elder there in my local church, and so I preach, probably several times a year there and surrounding churches. And I'm the young adult leader currently in my church, young adult co-leader. So I also have been a youth leader for many years before that. And I was a Pathfinder director for 13 years. I'm now just Pathfinder staff. I stepped down from that mainly because we needed new blood, right? Sometimes you just need new leadership to see new things. But I can't stay away from Pathfinders, just love Pathfinders. So to me, it's what it keeps me grounded. It keeps me real, right? Because I feel like so often we don't bridge the academy and the church. And so to be involved in both helps to both keep my academics more centered on what the church is asking, right? And also then to help me to use my academics to help the church, right? Because if it's just out here in the academic world, it never sees the light of day. And academics has a lot of answers to things that people are asking, but they just don't know how to find it. And so I think that's a big concern of mine that I want to do both in the Adventist Theological Society as well. Like we're trying to get more of the social media presence and getting our stuff out there because we have a lot of stuff that are resources for the church, but no one knows about it. So those are both my loves, like the youth ministry, church ministry stuff, as well as academics.
That's really powerful. And I love that with academia, it doesn't just have to be all intellectualized. It can be practical. It can be accessible. So you can bring the deep things and make it meaningful for individuals who don't have access to academia, which I think is very, very important for us to sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah. Well, and that's how it started, right? That's how academics started, was digging deeper in the questions that the church had to provide answers and to help us think about it. And I think we've often lost that, and they're kind of just separated rather than actually, bridging that gap and interlocking with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that aha moment that you had when you realized, oh, right, like I can dig deeper. The Bible is full of richness,
right?
In the same way where we can study all the minute things of biology, we can do that same thing with the Bible. I thought that was so powerful in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say are your current ministry endeavors? So you touched on writing a book and your contributions to ATS, but if you can expand on really how you intersect academia with your local church and other ministry endeavors that you're currently working on.
Yeah, so one of the things that I really am trying to do is to mentor young scholars and look for them. So like when I have a student who has a good paper, I encourage them to submit it to a student paper conference. And I've accompanied several students to multiple conferences and helping them to see that a theology degree doesn't have to lead to being a pastor. And in fact, we are in dire need of scholars. I mean, if you look at all the scholars in the church right now, most of them are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. And we do not have enough people to replace them. I mean, it's troubling, especially around the world. And a lot of our institutions, many of them don't even have someone with a PhD or have very few, right? So there's a dire need in our church for scholars. And yet young people don't realize that can be a ministry area, so for me, writing as well is a big thing because writing lives on, right? It lives on far beyond maybe just a sermon that you give, although now with the internet, we have more abilities for a sermon to live on also. But I think there's still part of writing that is even a deeper living on longer. And so that's a burden of mine on my heart. I get behind because I love spending time with people. So I don't always do as much writing as I should, but so mentoring students is a big thing for me. I also try to, to speak and share where I can things that I have found. So when someone asks me to preach, I will try to think about, okay, how can I, rather than reusing a sermon I already have, how can I take something from class or some research that I'm doing and make a sermon out of that? So I'm continually trying to use the things that I do in academia to minister to people also and make them practical. I think those, besides again my local church ministry, which I already mentioned, and the things I do here at the department, those are some of the bigger things on my mind. But right now I'm just being consumed with commentary stuff because we're really pushing to try to get it done. So I'm also writing the young adult quarterly for, I mean, it'll probably be 2 years from now, but it's due at the end of December on Deuteronomy. So the new inverse comment or new inverse quarterly. So that's another project I have. So yeah, lots of things, but fun things. I feel blessed. So.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think that's really key to point out, especially for those who might be listening, who are interested in digging deeper in the Word, the huge opportunity that there is in the scholarly world. Like, we need you. And one of the key things that you touched on was that, you know, there's so much opportunity there where you can focus on different things. Like, you can find something that you're interested in. And for you, it started with Hebrew. And I was wondering if you can share more about your expertise and your specialty in ministry.
Yeah. So I feel like it keeps growing and shifting and changing, but where it really started was my dissertation, which is God's care and God's response to animal vocalized need in the Old Testament. So where animals cry out to God and pray to God and his response to them. So I've been a lot involved in animals and animals in the Bible and that kind of thing. So that's really still my heart, where my heart is. I want to write more on that, but I don't, not a lot of people care about that. So I don't get asked as much. So I get asked to talk a lot about creation care because of that interest. So that is also an interest of mine. So how God instructs us to care for the earth and what he has made. But the majority of what I do is Old Testament stuff, of course. So I love helping people see new pictures of the Old Testament. So, and seeing God in a new way, right? And recognizing that he's not what they thought he was about the Old Testament. So my goal in classes is to tackle the hard stuff, to tackle the controversial passages, to tackle the difficult things, because I want people to realize that there are ways we can deal with them. We don't have all the answers, but to not be afraid of addressing those hard questions. So I love tackling those things in class type areas. And that's still a big burden of mine too. So I'm also involved in this Torah group, the Exploring the Composition of the Torah. And part of why we're doing that is because there's such a push for many people to think that the Torah was not written by Moses and was written much later. And so there's a group of us that are scholars all over the world, different faiths, who are coming together to try to say, no, there's good evidence in the Torah that it was written, at least in the time of Moses, and it was written by someone like Moses, right? And so likely by one author. And so we're putting together lots of different pieces of evidence and having conferences. And so that's a book that from a conference 4 years ago is just now being published this fall. So I'm really excited about that too. I never thought that would be my area, because I'm much more like poetry type stuff. I love the Torah though too. And now I'm writing a commentary on Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy has become just my heart. I just love it. I see it everywhere in the Bible now. So I have a lot of areas of interest. I think many times working for the church, your areas of interest are also driven sometimes by the need, right? So and I think I found that to be true for me. So I wouldn't have necessarily picked some of these areas, but I found myself really loving them.
I really appreciate how your needs are shifting and flexible. So you're not just focused on one thing for the rest of your career. You really allow it to be shaped by, yes, your interests, but also what are the needs and what is really necessary to help promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. And many people have difficult questions. Many people are asking about creation care and animal care and Old Testament and the Torah. And so I love that you're able to really find relevance in your work. And so as we conclude here, we've so enjoyed your time with us. Can you share a message of encouragement? We imagine that there are going to be women and men who are watching this who not only have an interest in ministry, but also have an interest in advanced studies and may not have thought before that they could do that. And so if you could just encourage those that are listening to pursue their dreams, even if that means biology or theology or anything else, that God is really calling them.
Yeah, totally. I think that to me was the key, and really why I ended up going into theology was because I found that that was my deepest passion, right? I'm also passionate about biology, but I found that I could study the Hebrew Bible all day and be happy, right? And like it did something to me that so it was, to me, it was following a passion, not knowing what the result would be or where God would lead me or what would happen, but being able to do that and go forward with that. And I think the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to be the token person, in the sense that if you're young, you're going to be like, oh, we need a young person, let's ask that person, right? We don't have anyone else. And some people might be offended by that. Or if you're a woman, you may be the only woman, they chose you because you're a woman, right? Like, but I've decided with God's help to just embrace that, right? Like, look at that as an opportunity that God has given you, rather than being frustrated at, oh man, they didn't choose me because they really like me. They choose me because they needed a woman or they needed someone young or whatever, right? So like, that's been really important to me too, because I think a lot of people don't see that, right? So both people don't follow their passions, and people are like, well, no, they need to see me for who I am, rather than just going into the opportunities God opens for you, no matter the reason he opened, no matter how they end up being opened. And then I think to be okay with, like I was saying there just a few minutes ago, being okay with doing something different than what you imagined, right? So like, you may have initially this passion, but be okay with that changing and opening and shifting and seeing what new avenues God opens for you, and enjoy the journey with the Lord, right? As we go forward.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think what you said there last was so key. We're not focused on the destination, we're focusing on the journey with God. And so it's not about the end result of what happens at the end. It's really being with God as he takes us on a ride, and we don't know where we're going, but God's with us, and that's all that really matters.
Amen.
We just want to thank you so much again. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you for mentorship, if they want to learn more about your ministry?
So I mean, email, you can find my email there, I think, on the Andrews website for the faculty. You can call me, you can text me, you can Facebook me, you can Instagram me. Whatever. I'm open for any of those types of communications. So.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Rahel Wells. We thank you for your time and your commitment to our young people. As you mentioned, youth ministry is a passion of yours, and all ages, but particularly our youth, are needing mentors. And so we thank you for the work that you're doing in combination with your work in the college campuses. So thank you so much again. And you heard it from Dr. Rahel Wells. If you would like to reach out to her, we encourage you to do that. We will have another set of interviews in the coming weeks. We will have another interview next Tuesday. And so we just really want to be able to share what phenomenal women in ministry are doing, so that you can reach out to them. So my name is, again, Kristen Thomas. And
my name is Angel Smith.
And we thank you so much again. Take care and be safe.